The Bruins ride into Beat SC week like this. A lot of families, the smarter one usually comes over here. The other one goes to the other school. But how are the Bruins coming in after their loss to Washington?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As you can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. New customers, you win that first $5 bet. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com to get started. Where we get started today is, of course, UCLA, in my mind, blew a great opportunity to ease their path to bowl eligibility. Now, it's still, they got to be perfect over the next two games. Both winnable for the Bruins, definitely, both at home. But you beat the Washington Huskies, then they would have served themselves so much better than needing to win these two games. All right, the emotions of Beat SC week are going to trickle down to a low prior to the Fresno State game. So that's never good. And what wasn't good for UCLA in this game? The run game. This was a game where it was early season UCLA. That is what this game reminded me of. UCLA played pretty solid for a decent portion of it. They forgot how to run the ball. The leading receiver was a running back. Multiple turnovers. UCLA doing something weird on special teams a couple of times. And then they just couldn't make the tackles defensively. Again and again, the Bruins seem to be primed in the right place. And yes, you have to give Washington credit for being a stingy red zone defense. But again, UCLA is one of the worst touchdown percentage red zone offenses in the country. So as much as Washington played up to snuff, the Bruins fell back on their old ways, right? The old habits die hard, and they were still alive and well in this game against Washington. It was not taking care of the football. It was the inability to convert deep in the red zone, missing a field goal, a bad punt, right? It's been a while since we've seen a poor punt when UCLA was going with two punters before Brody Richter came away with the job. And he had two bad punts. UCLA couldn't run the ball. Frustrating in this game. We saw a lot of reasons why Ethan Garber's job was being called for. A turnover, yes, being strip sacked. And then all of a sudden, you look at the countless times when you look at the broadcast, you see him pointed, hey, the dude's wide open in the end zone. He's wide open in the end zone. Oh, UCLA's down 11 if they want to mount a strong late game comeback. The first play, you break it down. You have a guy deep down the field up the sideline. You set your feet and you leave it out there for him. Then maybe UCLA even has a late shot in this game where they ended up losing 31-19, but definitely were much closer than that. It's just an absolutely frustrating performance for the Bruins. The running game was mostly Ethan Garber spinning out of tackles, making things happen against a Washington pass rush, which got to Garber for 6 sacks. Again, 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. So the Washington front was getting to the UCLA QB, stuffing the runs for losses. And this was just basically all the things we had seen from UCLA when they couldn't win games. This was not just like pre-3-game winning streak. This was almost beyond Minnesota. This felt a mixture between like a Minnesota game, the LSU game, and then a little bit of Hawaii too, right? You mix it all together and everything was going wrong. Because the Bruins failed in every aspect of this game. And it wasn't like an overall failure, but they just totally made one or two multiple plays, 2 to 3. Now that it's just all coming back. Plays on every side of the ball where they lost the game, right? Offensively, you can count more than 2 to 3 plays. Defensively, how many times was Williams in the backfield and the Bruins couldn't bring him down? And special teams, you miss a kick, you settle for field goals. Those don't go hand in hand, but you miss a kick when you absolutely needed it. And then a poor punt or two that initially leads to the Washington first lead of the game. And we're just stuck here scratching our heads. And I went on a limb and said, yeah, that was one of the worst performances from UCLA this season because they failed multiple times in all 3 phases of football. Offense, defense, special teams. They were able to move the ball. They gained a couple of yards. But I don't want to give UCLA a passing grade. I'll give them a C-. I was very emotional in that game Friday night. Very frustrated. But the best is C- because they got down there. They were attacking and moved the ball. But what should have been a strength, a resurgent strength for UCLA, finding that run game against a Washington team that had struggled against it, hadn't found a way to rush the quarterback, game planned enough, and worked around the Eric Bieniemy offense, worked around what's been a bit of a patchwork offensive line, considering they're down to a fourth tackle, 1, 2, 3, 4 injuries getting down to it. And eventually, that finally got to UCLA. The Bruins have been finding ways to work around the offensive line struggles and maybe turned it into a bit of a strength, keeping Garbers upright, having him use his legs, getting the ball out quicker, not having him get too much pressure, and then it all reared its ugly head once again. So a C- at best. I know I was like F, F, F on Friday. That's why we wait a few days and we give some real grades. So maybe a C- hovering towards a D+. They didn't get over 20 points per game. They should have had much more with the amount of points they left on the table. And I'm just frustrated because there's the difference between could have and should have won. I lean more in UCLA should have won with what they presented themselves. I think Deshaun Foster said it best after the game. It's disappointing because they shot themselves in the foot. And we all felt like UCLA played a better game. Like, which of the two teams had to switch their quarterback, right? UCLA was driving for the lead and coughed up the football. The Bruins had multiple. It's just, oh my goodness. Ridiculous for what they performed in this game. Yet it still was a Washington team that's now won 20 in a row at home. They've got two dynamic quarterbacks. They started with Will Rogers, who could throw the ball around, and went to Damon Williams Jr., which we'll talk about in a moment. But a lot of this has to go on the offense, who surprisingly went 10 of 19 in the third down conversions. 10 of 19, and you're wondering, how did UCLA not get that right? 10 of 18, 10 of 19, converted a fourth down, had more yards in a game that did not have a lot of yards. UCLA had just over 300. Washington had just over 300. But it was the Bruins' turnovers, the missed opportunities, and penalties. 9 penalties for 47 yards. It wasn't the yardage total, but it was the number that continues to stack up and hurt the Bruins game in and game out, which makes it just all the more frustrating when I really believed by watching the game and how it was developing, like it was just a matter of time UCLA would take the lead when they just didn't. They just didn't. And why didn't they do that? Because the offense sputtered and the defense ran out of gas, who we'll talk about next on Locked On UCLA. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or agonizing second or triple overtimes. But, hey, what they've created is Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot. A special flavor called Fan Fuel is the energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot, last to leave. We see you. All right? So we're talking about UCLA, and you're sitting there back-to-back Friday nights. Maybe you're at the Rose Bowl a couple weeks ago, fighting through that Friday traffic just to get home to watch that game and set up an at-home tailgate. Well, 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a lot of energy, especially being a UCLA fan during BSC week. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, it's always a mile-long to-do list. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout this season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. Again, the number 5hourenergy.com. Shipped nationwide. All right, let's talk about the frustrating performance defensively, right? The Bruins did a lot to keep themselves in the game. UCLA turned it over. The offense couldn't find ways to stick in it. And this is the defense that had Washington on the ropes. Less first downs than UCLA on offense. Washington only converted 3 of their 9 third downs, fell short on a 4th down, picked off Will Rogers to the point that Jedd Fisch had to bench his senior quarterback on senior night. That's a lot of emotions for a quarterback, for a coach, making a statement with the guy that transferred in, right? There's a lot of things that you make when you pull your quarterback and the youngster comes in and performs. And it speaks a lot to a senior quarterback for Washington, a longtime quarterback in Will Rogers, who went and supported his teammate throughout all that despite being pulled. And that's because of how good UCLA's defense was playing, stepping in front of not 1, not 2, but 3 Will Rogers passes. 1 called back, eventually led to Washington points. Again, the discipline aspect of the game is where UCLA has been drawing a fine line in year 1 under Deshaun Foster. He understands the importance of it, but it's cost UCLA 1 to 2 games at this point. The Minnesota game, where maybe that game could have gone to overtime, but they were just falling on the dude to waste clock, and that led to time stoppage and more yardage, and I think a fresh set of downs against Minnesota late in the game for 1st and goal. And then in this one, a late hit by Femi Oladejo turns away a UCLA pick that got the momentum back. Washington gets points, and the Bruins have to go again and again. You can't fault UCLA's defense as much, as frustrated as I was in the first 2.5 quarters of this game, because I thought they played as good a football as you can get. In addition, Carson Schlesinger continues to be an absolute beast. 17 tackles, 10 solo tackles. Femi Oladejo, for his big late hit that cost the Bruins an interception, 2 tackles for loss. Luke Schuerman, the D3 transfer going D1, had his first sack and 2 tackles for loss. Everybody was making things happen. The one bugaboo for this defense in this night, though, was no true pressure. 1 sack, 5 tackles for loss. And a lot of that was generated from Oladejo and Schuerman. Other than that, there wasn't a lot of statistical pressure. They weren't getting in the backfield. Washington didn't run roughshod over them until Damon Williams Jr. came in late, which was 31 yards. But it was the read option that killed him. Jonah Coleman did go for nearly 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it was the added pressure of Damon Williams Jr., who in 6 carries changed the game. Literally changed the game by carrying it 6 times, a couple of handoffs, and UCLA could not figure it out. Plays that should have been stuffed for 3-yard losses, a play that should have been stuffed at the line of scrimmage, turned into 1st down runs, 5-yard runs, and that really closed the door on UCLA's chances to win this game in Seattle. Credit to Jedd Fisch for reading it and leaning on the freshmen to go with reps. I think it's a very different situation compared to what UCLA had to do with earlier this year with Garbers being injured. Jamal Williams has that exciting Energizer Bunny speed, right? Just boom, 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 boom. A lightning bolt moving so quick. And the agility to shift gears and make the UCLA defense look a bit foolish in some of these plays. And probably moments where they weren't truly game planned. They're thinking, hey, what? Maybe thought of throw us. No. Damon Williams Jr. was 7 of 8. So when UCLA was going after, hey, he's going to run, pulls it out, throws for a pass, gave it to Coleman, make a play. He would keep it, and UCLA was just diving in there like a broken controller when you're playing NCAA football 25. Oh, no, what are you doing? You guys just, whether your joystick's falling down, the Bruins just look foolish and beaten and battered down late in that 4th quarter. When UCLA needed to stop to hold them to a field goal, they couldn't do it. Arizona, man, imagine if they had kept Jedd Fisch. Washington in year 1 with just about nothing staying behind after that national championship game appearance earlier in the year. Jedd Fisch has done an admirable job getting to 6 wins before the 12th and final game. And I think it might even be a bigger say and a bigger mention if Deshaun Foster can close out the season with 2 wins to earn UCLA a chance to get to a bowl game. But none other would be bigger than the good old USC win. For the defense, frustrating. I'm going to give them a C+ performance. They were getting off on 3rd down, did enough to keep the plays in front of them, and then the QB switch happened, and the athleticism of Williams Jr. against a gassed UCLA defense and just truly a very talented quarterback just put the Bruins on skates. Put them on skates on a cold night in Seattle and against Washington. The frustration was there. To give another one to special teams was a D at best. A lot of field goals were made by Mateen Bagani. In this game, he made 2 of 3, and then you had Brody Richter, who on his 3 punts for 90 yards averaged 30 yards. That was helped out by a 50-yard punt he made. So that means the first 2 punts combined for just a little over 40 yards when UCLA needed him to boot the crap out of the ball. And that did not happen. So now as I think about it, I'm thinking D minus, more F range when you miss the field goal and then 2 bad punts, costing UCLA a total of 10 points in this game when they lost it by 12. You add in the defensive miscue, erasing an interception. You take that, UCLA costing themselves a field goal with a strip sack in the hand. All those, that's 10, 15, that's about 16 points on just 4 plays. UCLA is missing a field goal. A poor punt putting Washington in prime position to go score the first touchdown of the game. And then a strip sack at Garbers, a nullified interception. Those 4 plays cost UCLA close to 10 to 20 points in the game with how it played out. In a game they lost by 12, and it was much closer than that until the final 6 to 5 minutes in the fourth quarter. It was just sloppy in a game that needed to be not perfect, but better than they were. And there's teams who are militant in their efforts to avoid penalties and play clean football games again and again, and they would win this game. It was this was not a very pretty football game to watch. It was not a classic. It was one of those when you have 2 teams scrapping for big moments in their season. Washington's going to Oregon next. They were playing for this on senior night, on a Friday night blackout, to ensure themselves going to a bowl. UCLA didn't have that sense of urgency yet, maybe feeling high and mighty after the 3 straight wins. They played in some of the toughest places to play on the road. But in years to come, and however many years Deshaun Foster is the head coach, these penalties, 9 for 47 yards, have to get cleaned up. Have to. Now, every year, every team is going to deal with a boneheaded play, a boneheaded penalty in a poor spot. But it's been week in and week out that is costing UCLA games where they should be up a score or 2 scores or 3 scores, like that Nebraska game. And then they're fighting and scrapping and clawing just to earn a win at the end, or in this case, down 2 scores against Washington, when they should be playing neck and neck like the stats kind of indicated, but they didn't. And some of that, a lot of it, had to deal with the lack of discipline from the Bruins when it comes to committing penalties. So a C minus offensively, C plus defensively, and a D to D minus on special teams, because there was a couple of plays that truly cost the Bruins 10 points. They've been better, and that's why I said it was one of the worst losses of the season, because every different part of the game had multiple miscues. From the discipline, everything. And that's why I was so frustrated, because that was brutal to watch and how that finished. Next, we're going to talk about how the rest of the Big Ten finished and how that sets up UCLA for the rest of the season, which most importantly, their final Big Ten game of the regular season comes against that team across town. Get ready to tackle on the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Again, FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to bet and place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Get a hunch in the middle of the game. You want to view the latest stats. You can do that all and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet as a new customer. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so your boy's sitting here on a trip across the East Coast, right? I want to go check out some of these new sports venues. Well, GameTime had it hooked up, right? I'm looking for some best deals. Next, I'm checking out the Brooklyn Nets in an NBA Cup game. I'm like, where am I going to go? Went to GameTime, got a zone deal, got cheap tickets to go check out an NBA game across the country. GameTime is where it's at because they got zone deals. You can see what you're sitting. You're going to sit behind a pole. You're going to sit behind an aisle where everybody's going to cross in front of your face. You check it all out with GameTime. That's helped me out in two very crucial situations in the last couple months to get me big-time tickets with GameTime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime Picks. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account using the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? It's game time. Cruising on, final segment here of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Once again, around the Big Ten to wrap up this episode as we normally do on the Monday nights. So what did the rest of the Big Ten do? It was a weird night in college football. A lot of weird upsets, near upsets. One of the biggest being Oregon battling at Camp Randall and having to survive this undefeated regular season where it was almost anything but. In the same week, you had Ohio State taking on Northwestern at Wrigley Field. And Northwestern was up 7-0 heading in the second quarter. So UCLA Washington took the West Coast billing of the Friday night Big Ten football game on Fox. Oregon, Wisconsin. I thought Wisconsin got a little hosed on what was as the commentator said on the broadcast that night, a pretty weak chop block call, which could have been an Oregon or a Wisconsin first down. Yet, as you saw, Oregon's defense was good. Wisconsin's offense was not. They fired their offensive coordinator. Wisconsin was playing, again, without their starting quarterback, who's been out since, I think, around, if not prior to the Alabama game. They almost took down SC. They had a jump in stadium and a jump around. It was one of the best scenes I've seen cinematically, sitting at home watching a college football game in the audience, and it felt like you were there. But Oregon, with a 10-0 blitz, came back to win that football game. I wanted Oregon to lose so we could shut up Spencer. Wouldn't have hurt Oregon's chances to get into the college football playoff, even if they lost one or two. But now they've pretty much solidified themselves as a top 5 seed, right? Either it's the 1 seed winning the Big Ten or the number 5 seed as the first team just shy of winning a conference championship. So that 16-13 game, pretty exciting. Ohio State, Northwestern, another slow start for Ohio State. Northwestern on the board early, and yet more special teams miscues. It's always fun to see a football game at Wrigley Field, right? Or remember how UCLA was supposed to play the Holiday Bowl at Petco Park, which is now going to be played the Holiday Bowl at Snapdragon Stadium. You like funny venues, and we will get that in the college football bowl season, or like games being played at Yankee Stadium. Football games, that is. No. Purdue, Penn State. I think that's all you have to say about that game. Penn State blitzed Purdue 49-10 in West Lafayette. It's not basketball season, but for now, Penn State is trying to earn some style points as a one-loss Big Ten team to keep themselves in this middle purgatory with the expansion of the 12-team playoff. Penn State continues to build that case as they might be in that spot where they might not beat Ohio State, or if Michigan's good, or if it was an Oregon this year as it has been, they played them. Okay. But they had the schedule. They'll go 9-1, 10-1, 11-1. And unless Indiana does something really weird and beats Ohio State, and then maybe Indiana does something weird and loses, who knows what the tiebreaker scenario could be. Indiana not playing this week, but Penn State doing what they need to do. Illinois just closing out Michigan State. Michigan State's another one of those teams like UCLA that needs to win their final 2 games to get to a bowl berth. All right, there's quite a few Big Ten teams that start off well, have lost some crucial games down the stretch. And Michigan State, just like UCLA, needs to get things done. Illinois beating Michigan State 38-16. USC, Nebraska, a game that featured a touchdown by USC in every quarter. Jade Maeva coming in for Miller Moss, a QB switch that will significantly impact the UCLA game against USC. Is that something that saves Lincoln Riley's job? Not quite, but it does keep USC into true contention for a bowl. They're 5-5. Nebraska falls to 5-5. And again, one-score games from Nebraska, they're cursed. And when they have a chance to make their first bowl berth since 2016, they have failed, unfortunately, every time in grandiose fashion. Whether they have an early lead with the pick six, whether it's a one-score game, they found and find new heartbreaking ways to lose every game. This time, maybe you could have looked at the tug by the USC player and the Nebraska player in the end zone for what could have been a PI, led to first and goal at the 1. Wasn't called. It's beat SC week. And if UCLA beats Nebraska, keeps UCLA in a bowl berth, keeps USC from gaining bowl eligibility, and if UCLA can win that last game and Notre Dame beats USC in that last game, UCLA bowl eligible, USC not. That would say a lot to the UCLA doubters. And then you got Rutgers beating Maryland. So UCLA won the road to beat Rutgers. USC couldn't go on the road to beat Maryland. And Maryland, one of those teams, a one-win Big Ten team, and their one win came against USC, of all teams. One win in the Big Ten, and they beat USC. I don't think UCLA has had as bad of losses this year as USC has had, especially in the Big Ten. Bruins have not had, they've had a performance, they've had eye test losses, they've had discipline losses, which are frustrating to watch. When it comes to straight record, Minnesota's been bowl eligible for a little bit. They look strong, beating USC earlier in the year. LSU, yes, they now got 4 losses, but they're still technically ranked, and you can't expect UCLA to have gone into Tiger Stadium. Indiana's ridiculous. Penn State's been ridiculous. Washington's now bowl eligible. UCLA does not have a bad loss like USC does to a Maryland on the road that is 4-6, yet another Big Ten team on the cusp. So of the teams that still have opportunities to make it, you've got Maryland 1. You've got USC, Nebraska, Michigan State, technically Northwestern. I don't believe in it, but they do. Wisconsin needs a win, and UCLA needs a win. So that's 7 of the 18 teams in this Big Ten conference that all need a win or 2 in the next few weeks to decide whether they're a bowl-eligible conference, the Big Ten standings, which UCLA could vault up and jump ahead preseason expectations, or vault right back into the exact spot they were predicted to finish in the preseason, which could be 15th or tied for it with like 5 teams and no tiebreakers needed for a 10-way tie at 3-3 or something. So I can't wait to see how it all plays out in the next couple of weeks. But again, you know what this week is? It's Beat SC week. So get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA beat SC. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.